Mantra is a purpose-built L1 blockchain that is dedicated to real-world asset tokenization. It is powered by the Ohm token. And oh my God, did you see the price action last week? A 90% drop, which represented over $5 billion in market cap. This was eviscerated from the investors' bags, and there's been panic all over social media. The founder, JP, he's who joins me on this interview. He's been very public, very open about the incident. He's even suggested burning some of his tokens in order to restore trust. But this was likely preventable, and token holders have rightfully been shaken. JP joins me. He's going to explain the rise and fall of the token and the future of Mantra. It's his first time here on Dead Cat Crypto, so we welcome him. And if you're a first timer, please subscribe down below. Happy to have you. Enjoy this in-depth conversation about Mantra and what's going to actually happen with the Ohm token. Welcome to Dead Cat Crypto. It's your first time on the channel. Before we started recording, I mentioned, hey, we kind of met at a New York City Cosmoverse event where you were talking about Mantra, and I think like it was at the beginning of the launch, or you guys were about to launch something.
Yeah.
So JP, welcome. And regardless of the people watching, if you lost money, whatever, he's out here, he's doing the best that he can. So I'm happy to give you the spotlight here to explain. Thanks so much for coming on.
I appreciate it, man. Obviously been a challenging time for the community, for our token holders, and the team. And we're just here to try to set the record straight, show that we're committed to doing right and trying to fix this, honestly, and communicating as transparently as possible along the way.
Yeah, so I think if this happened like 10 times, 9 times out of 10, founders would disappear. They would disappear, especially if there was some on-chain shenanigans that was easy to see. First question, are you or the team in any kind of legal trouble or subject to any investigation, whether it's by you guys yourselves or third-party investigations right now?
I'm not sure I can answer that just because I don't even know if. I mean, it is entirely possible that something is going on at this stage. But presently, we have been in contact with our own regulator, and that was actually one of our first calls on Monday morning, Asia time, obviously. So, we've been as transparent and forthcoming as possible, and we'll continue to collaborate and work with any regulator or authority that requests information from us. Because we feel like we do have nothing to hide.
Got it. Okay. And it seems like this all originated on a centralized exchange, which I think that's not the norm. I think a lot of times these like massive liquidations and the after effects, a lot of it starts in a liquidity pool on a DEX. It
Mm,
seems like to me, at least the
mm.
ones that I've seen. Would you say this was a malicious attack versus maybe a vulnerability that a trader was able to exploit to make a quote unquote good trade? How would you characterize this if you had to, in simple terms?
I would say I don't know. I'm not going to go as far and say malicious because I don't know the intentions, but I would say targeted. Someone,
Target.
someone knew what was. Someone knew something. Based off of some of the things that we're hearing and understanding, um, it was too circumstantial, the timing, and too just weird that this occurred on a Sunday night, Asian hours. Like normally these unwinds and these kind of liquidity events happen orderly fashion over a period of time. This happened like you know
Yeah.
that, and that's just not standard practice. And to be completely honest, we had major news coming on Monday, which has obviously been
Mhm.
paused, and more coming in the second half of the week. So
A-
the timing is circumspect at best.
And
Yeah.
I've seen you on X confirm this didn't originate with an actual paid member of your team
That's
unloading
correct.
tokens during a low volume time. Okay. And
Absolutely correct.
since this happened on a centralized exchange, are you guys able to back that up versus if it had happened, on chain, people could just verify the
I
wallets?
mean, yeah, it would have been a lot easier to verify if this had been an on-chain event. I think a lot of people pointed to like tokens being moved onto a particular exchange in the lead up or the run up to this happening. But if you actually go back and start looking at the history of token movements in size, you can see that one particular exchange had certain levels of ohm collateral ratio that then got haircuts over time. And as those haircuts occurred, you can see those tokens move to another exchange that had higher levels of ohm collateral ratios. So you had this swap that occurred. And you can see, it's not like you can see one wallet connected to another because like from a sex to a sex is, it's kind of a little bit hard to see sometimes. But you
Right.
could see literally just from the timing of these movements that that's effectively what happened, right? So there was clearly some degree of like leverage shift or risk shift from one to the
Mhm.
other. And I think that's what people were pointing to, like, oh, all these tokens went on exchange. Normally, when we've had tokens go on exchange, those on-chain sleuths are like, oh, someone moved a bunch of tokens onto exchange, must sell.
Mhm.
But if you look at the chart, tokens would move onto exchange, and there wasn't selling. So what you could kind of like infer from that statement, or from that action, I should say, is that these tokens were being used as collateral for leverage positions.
Collateral. Got
Yeah.
it. Okay. All right. Um,
And obviously that wasn't us, right? That wasn't us. That wasn't our core investors. Um,
so someone
and that's
just had
also
a lot
been,
of tokens. Someone just, whether they bought them or whatever, or maybe they're holding them for other people, which does happen. Um,
yeah.
Someone had a lot of tokens enough to, you know, either take advantage of some outsized risk or put themselves in some risk that was taken advantage by someone else. Is that fair?
I would say more, yes, I would say more the latter, I think. Um, and it seems like it was, I mean, from my, now having had conversations with affected parties, or at least some of the affected parties. I don't know the
Mhm.
entire extent of this, obviously. I don't know I mean, there's several 100,000 token holders
Right.
just on chain, let alone on exchange. That number's probably significantly more, to be honest, on sexes. But having had conversations with several affected parties, it seems like it's multiple people who were impacted by this.
Understood. All right. Most people watching this, they're going to care about the token, right? They're going to care mostly about the token until there's some tangible thing that they could do with their tokens besides just stake, vote, and all that. Um,
Hmm.
Leading up to this, it was roughly a 90% drop in minutes or an hour, something like that. The
Yep.
valuation was like 5 billion to
Yep.
$6 billion.
Yep.
Was there any concern internally leading up to this that hey, valuation's kind of high versus our liquidity, the token distribution may not be ideal? Or was the feeling internally like, hey, we're doing great, valuation is up, people like what we're doing? Yeah, it might be mostly speculation, but we know we have these partnerships and XYZ coming. Don't worry about it.
Um, I mean, obviously, it's like it's kind of my job to worry about it. I think, and be thinking about how to like, okay, you have price action, and in our case, it could be, it's a fair assessment, or maybe at least a fair um, statement to say, maybe not assessment, a statement to say that hey, the price action is front running the substance here, right?
Yeah.
Happens, and
Happens in the
then
stock market too. Yeah.
it happens, and yeah, it just happens, right? Um, but we were doing everything we could to make sure that our substance caught up, right? We had major announcements with major players, we had licensing, we had real deals, we had big institutional backers. The team was working really hard, and building something real. Like we were actually the first mover to the market for a usable real world asset layer one. Um, that crypto people actually could get around. Got to give a shout out to Provenance. They were probably the first, but the counter to that is no crypto people really use Provenance, right? It's got a lot of institutional interest, but it's not. We were like the first to really have that kind of mix of institutional interest and trust, and retail usage, right?
Mhm.
And there's something to be said for being the first mover, right? There's a lot of people who are now
Absolutely.
doing the same thing,
Yep.
or trying to, right? We're like they're still coming. They haven't launched the chains yet. So obviously we did have something going there. But at the same time, I don't ever. I mean, there was never any like, shit, are we like in trouble here? It was more just hey, we got to fucking work. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be cussing on this on this show
I
or
don't
not,
know
but
either. Don't worry about it. My
yeah,
YouTube's not even monetized. Don't worry. Well, I'll
okay,
you
I'll try to
YouTube.
keep it to a minimum.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
But we definitely don't want to be, we had to do our job and make sure that people could use this thing and that there was substance and that people could believe in what we're doing. So I don't think there was ever a major concern, but it was also like, hey, let's take advantage of our opportunity.
All right. Makes sense. Makes sense. And a lot of
Sorry,
times
actually, I think
these
there was maybe was there a slightly first part to that question? Do you remember?
um it was just the high valuation. Was it something
Yeah.
you
Oh,
guys were
liquidity. I do want to talk about the
Yeah.
liquidity idea. Yeah, yeah. I think what you were able to see in the turmoil of the weekend, um, was that you know this market is really like on a it's a fine line between like success
Yeah.
and complete utter chaos.
Well, I
And
oversimplify it usually. Usually how I oversimplify it, I just say the market caps are all fake, which is
well,
which
yeah.
is, you know, not not too far from the truth, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, no, but honestly, it is like relatively true from the sense of like you might have whatever 5-6 billion market cap token. Does that mean that someone can sell $5 or $6 billion worth of something? Absolutely not. And
Right.
particularly when you're taking like the very complex dynamics of a perpetual futures market with a spot market and liquidity on both of these things and how they interact with each other across exchanges and arbitrage opportunities, all this stuff. Like the average person has no clue how this works,
Plus there's the
right?
pairings on decentralized exchanges against other super volatile tokens possibly, or stable coins that could depeg at any minute. So
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot going on. And I would imagine, you guys were able to pinpoint that, at least have it on the radar before, last week, right?
Well, I mean, you know, we never really, if you looked at the volume, right? Like the spot market was still doing, generally 50 at the low end to, 150, $200 million of volume a day,
It's a
maybe even
lot.
more on certain occasions. That's a lot, right? That's not an insignificant amount just on spot.
Most
And instant,
most founders would kill to have that volume for the year right now.
probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and if you look at the volume on perpetuals, that was 3 to 5 times that amount on a daily basis. So, obviously that's different than volume is different than liquidity. But the way that we saw the kind of the market play out when in this scenario is like you had a little bit of spot selling, at least based off the analysis of Trader View 2, Dom, the guy who's posted some really interesting analysis. LTRD, I
Yes.
don't know how to say, has
That was
also
good.
posted some very interesting, very very
I felt
good,
it was fair. Yeah, it was good.
very very good. And what you're able to see based off this data was that like a little bit of spot selling, then compounded with this like massive perp selling, which is like where I say that it's a targeted move. Something happened there, right? And then obviously it ended up triggering collateral margin issues,
Mhm.
which then causes cascade. And again, I don't know what happened in the collateral situation that and how it unwound like that, but normally it doesn't just unwind like that, right? And so
Right.
something had to have happened, and that's where just like we need more information on this, and how did this end up working? And I think that's where we've made a call to exchanges to say, hey, like there's some questions here that we want to work with you guys on because our community, our investors, and the broader audience or the crypto community deserves some answers.
Yeah, it's true. And I was on a space. It was 2 days ago, and we're being like kind of pessimistic. And my response was, why wouldn't this happen? There's thousands of tokens. The centralized exchanges don't even have adequate liquidity. They're doing these like 10, 50, 100x leverage platforms, attracting people to basically gamble. So like, why wouldn't this happen? And the fact that it happened on a centralized exchange versus on chain, which I think on chain a lot of times people see it coming. They say, "Up, this LTV is getting unhealthy. Someone needs to deposit more collateral. Hey, watch out for this. I see this happening on
Yeah.
this leverage platform." On the centralized exchange, my thinking is either they benefit directly from this and they just don't care about these super volatile moves, or
Yeah.
they're incompetent and they're actually getting hurt by this as well. I don't know if
Yeah.
you have an opinion on that, but like from like a simplistic retail point of view where we don't have a lot of the information, I don't know the inner workings of a centralized exchange.
Yeah.
Do you think that safeguards put in place by the centralized exchange could have mitigated this a little bit, or do you think that's not their
A lot.
responsibility? A lot.
No, I
Okay.
do think it is. I do think it
Yeah.
is. Frankly, I do think it is a responsibility.
Because
And
you
I,
guys could have
and
been done up by a combination of like a whale and like those associated with a platform. That could have
yeah.
happened. Maybe not in this exact case, but it shows that if the centralized exchanges has blinders on for this kind of thing, maybe it's intentional, maybe it's incompetence, maybe we're early, like what everyone else says. I don't think we're early, but man,
Mm.
you would think that the centralized exchange is either profiting from this directly by a lot and they're willing to risk their reputation for it, or they're incompetent and they got hurt as well. So that's the only thing I wanted to throw out
My
there. Yeah.
yeah. My read on it is there without I need to be careful what I say.
Yeah, be
Um
careful.
the
You sound kind of American. You might want to be careful.
well, it's actually not about me. It's just more about like
All
I
right.
don't want
I
to
know.
necessarily piss off the wrong people in this situation. Um but yes, obviously as an American we need to be cautious of what we say. And I think the big issue here was this was preventable,
Okay.
right? In my opinion, this was entirely preventable. And if risk had been managed in a less aggressive, less um, negligent way, you could even say, this shouldn't have happened. Because again, like use the example of like someone just an average person that forecloses on their house. Do you come and take that in 2 hours in 2 minutes? No, it's obviously going to take a little bit of time, right?
Yep. Yep.
And in this case, if someone gets margin called, generally you're going to have a window of time to fix that. But
Ideally, a
that,
call. You know,
well, yeah, well,
and
I'm not going to
TradFi.
insinuate. I'm not going to insinuate that there wasn't a call. I'm sure there was
Right.
a call,
There could have been
but
an email fired out. Yeah.
but but at the same time, I think what is clear is that the time between the decrease in price, because honestly, Ohm had been relatively steady for some time.
Yeah.
Um,
Compared to the market, for sure. Yeah.
well, at least during that week in the run up, right? So it was like
Hmm.
right around whatever 620, 630, whatever. And then I think I went to bed and it was like $6.30 or $6.20, right? So this was like midnight Korea time. I wake up at 5 and it's down, right? So that means that during that period of time, someone got margin called during this liquidation event, and they seized all the collateral during that window. That's not a normal period of time to repay collateral and top up margin.
Right.
It's just not, right? So there was something going on, which again, I don't know what the risk was, I don't know what the position was, but in the end of the day, it just seems suspect to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think regardless of centralized exchange, decentralized exchange, whatever, I think one thing retail needs to be aware of is not everyone is going to have your best intentions in mind. I think
For
there are
sure.
still a lot of people in the space, and maybe we are early in this regard, that they thrive or even exploit the gray area between on chain, off chain, crypto, tradfi. And a lot of times you get people who, for them, it's like a simple trade, or maybe they could profit from this kind of trade. And man,
Mm,
there's like tremendous fallout sometimes, especially when the valuation of this token was so high. If this was a you know $25 million market cap meme token, nobody would care. Everyone would just
yeah,
move on. People feel like they lost that amount of money, because they see it
yeah,
on the chart. So I don't know. I mean, the token shouldn't be the the central talking point of every project, but the token kind of is the scorecard for teams
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
hard to gauge who's shipping and who's not, and who's shipping something valuable versus who's just checking off their roadmap, right? So,
Mm,
um, any regrets as far as the original tokenomics design or anything like that, or
mm.
is this going to cause some changes going forward that your team can control, even though the token's already been out there? So maybe it's hard to stop to
Yeah.
change things midstream. Just curious what you guys are thinking. You know, um, leading up to this, any regrets versus going forward, any deliberate changes to the tokenomics.
So I think there's been two massive red herrings in this whole entire situation. Maybe three, depending on how you want to say it. One is like, I think that we kind of are getting across that, but the first one was like insider rug pull, right? Um, like team sold, we whatever, like we put out a transparency report with wallets labeled for what the team holdings are and the vesting and all this other stuff a week prior to this, right? Like, why would we do that and then go and do this on a Sunday right before we have all this massive news? It doesn't make any sense. So that's one.
Right.
Two is that our tokenomics are somehow like massively flawed and that we hold 20 or 90% of the supply. It's like
I've seen that around
it
Twitter.
goes everywhere. And I'm like, how is that even possible? We literally have on Ethereum 120,000 wallets that have Ohm in it, right? Many of them are on centralized exchanges, Binance, OKX, Bybit,
Right.
or whatever, right? How the hell is that us? And there's 99% of these tokens in circulation of the initial 888 million supply. 99%, 99.99, I think, actually. So how the hell do we own 99% or 90% of it? Doesn't make any sense. What they were pointing to is that there's this mirror bucket, or that's where the initial FUD came from. Significantly uneducated FUD, to be honest. That said this mirror bucket was somehow used for us to like whatever extract or control supply or have a low float. It's like this occurred on the Ethereum side of the equation, which is 90% and 99.99% in circulation. It had very little to do with the mainnet. And then people said, "Oh, because you've inflated the supply." After publicly communicating this for over a year and then launching the mainnet, that now somehow this is a tokenomics issue. It's had nothing to do with tokenomics. It's had everything to do with the fact that there was leverage in the system. It got moved from one exchange that took a haircut to another that had the same rules in place. Anyone is allowed to buy Ohm. I can't stop that from happening.
Right.
Right. And I can't stop them from going and taking leverage on an exchange that allows them to do that within their rules. It's just that's just the state of play here, right? But so those are the two things that I just want to make very clear. What I do absolutely regret is, and I've been pretty consistent with this. Like I regret sleeping. I regret going to sleep that night because it looked, my last tweet that I put out was like, oh, the freaking Wi-Fi on the airplane doesn't work. And then, I land in Korea. I'm with my, my in-laws for dinner. My wife's Korean. We met her parents, and I go to sleep, and I wake up to this shit show. And everyone's like, "What the hell?" Team Rug, blah, blah, not answering tweets, blah, whatever. Like, so, honestly, if I could have done it again, I just wouldn't have gone to bed because at least being there in the moment and being able to respond directly would have, I think would have been like even just that short window of time, like 1, 2, 3 hours, whatever it was. I mean, I just wish I had that back. And, I guess like now it allows us an opportunity. I do really see this as an opportunity as painful as it's been and as hard as it's been, to, pull the greatest comeback of all time, which our first comeback will be the second greatest because, Ohm was dead in 2023, right? We were 1.7 cents in October of 2023, 1.7 cents. Top 800.
Whoever was around then and believed in what you guys were doing, they're happy no matter what, I guess, today, because they got to experience the comeback as holders. Maybe.
Yeah, I think that I think they feel. I don't know if they're happy. Like obviously they may still be up, but I don't know if they're going to be happy. Just because the community is real.
It's hard
right?
to make token holders happy.
Well, the thing is, I think that it's honestly it's been refreshing to see how steadfast the community's been, how supportive they've been of each other. And again, this is an opportunity for us to bring enhanced degrees of transparency. This allows us an opportunity to be literally like people talk about building in public. I mean, my God, the whole freaking crypto world knows about Mantra and Omen and JP Mullin right now, right?
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
like the most infamous person in the crypto space at this
You
point in
guys
time.
can fire your whole marketing team and save that money, right?
I'm not gonna do that.
I don't mean to laugh.
Um,
I'll edit this out. My audience will be pissed, but I'm joking if they hold this token. But um, yeah, I mean,
so I think listen, we're still here. We're still committed. Our investors are still committed. They're in it for the long haul. They're looking to extend their locks voluntarily. We're looking to burn significant amounts of tokens. We're looking to do a buyback program. We're looking to add enhanced transparency about historical fundraising transactions. So we're trying to take everything to the next level. We're committed to doing that. And we're going to keep going. The fundamentals haven't changed. It's a setback for sure. But again, I literally think this is I thought that my time before was going to be this amazing comeback and whatever. This is the biggest setback in my career. It's been the hardest couple of days of my life. But this is what I'm staking my legacy on.
I saw you put out a tweet about transparency,
Mm,
something about a dashboard to be able
yeah.
to give like the kind of overview of I guess where the tokens are at, right?
Yep.
I think that that's a tremendous idea. I think anyone who issues a token, because they start on chain,
Yep.
at least every 24 hours or a week, you should be able to show a rough estimate of where all the tokens are at any given time.
Hmm.
20% are on Binance, 15% are on Coinbase, 60% are um, being staked by individuals or whoever, and then this percent is vesting. There's no reason why this doesn't already exist. It's sad that something like this needs to happen to say, what are we not doing for transparency? Well, why don't we do this? How realistic, or how I should say, I definitely know it's realistic to do this.
Mm.
How close can you get it so people could take a glance at this dashboard and say, okay, I could see that yesterday tokens
We've
were here.
already
Now
we've already built
tokens
it.
are over here. You already have
Literally
it. Okay,
since
there you go.
it's already yeah. So it's more just about when we want to launch the first version, and the first version will just be this list of tokens that's live, and you'll be able to see it. And I think future versions would have centralized exchange addresses. It could have emissions and how much is left in an
Yeah,
unlocking schedule. It could have team wallets. It could have all different types of stuff,
that's
right?
something else
So
I would like to see. I would like to see, every white paper has it. They've got it's always like part 3 or part 4 of the white paper, tokenomics, and it's just like a
mm,
pie chart of
yep.
the distribution, right? And you don't even know what the percentages based on the max supply, the circulating supply, but there's
Mm,
always like 15% for the team, 10% for investors, 18% for this. I would love to see just wallets. I don't care what the distribution is. Show me the wallets, and then if someone really wants to be a sleuth or be a nerd and they want to track from Genesis to 2 years later where all the tokens went, then that
mm,
could be on them. But I think for kind of like if I go to Fidelity and I want to research a stock, I know how many what percent of the supply or what percent of the um, stocks are held by the CEO, the CFO.
yeah.
It might not be helpful in the moment, but just to be able to compare side by side what one team is doing versus what another team is doing and say, oh, you know what? I kind of like this. This might influence what I buy and hold or what I buy and stake as a token. Just more information is going to help
Yeah.
retail
I
make
agree.
smarter decisions. You're never going to get retail to stop chasing shiny objects, at least when
Mm,
they first come into crypto. But as time goes on, smarter retail I think will keep founders more honest, but also
I agree.
founders like yourself have to be willing to you're putting yourself out there, you're going to commit to transparency. You could easily have done the easy thing like I take blame, I'm leaving, I'll give back half my tokens and then you just move on to another project which happens all the time in
Mm.
crypto. But yeah, I mean the
Yeah, I would never.
transparency and for people that are watching to be clear, yes, I think there needs to be a lot more accountability with, anyone who issues a token. If you want to build a platform with no token, I don't even care what happens over there. You're kind of experimenting with software. As soon as you're issuing a token to retail, accountability
You're
is
public.
important, but also information for retail to make their own decisions because that's what crypto
Yeah,
is all about, right? With my wallet, I'm going to do this, this, and this because I have access to this information. That's important as well. That's all I wanted to say.
I agree with that 100%. I mean, I think the standards for, I mean, listen, like, I think in general, the standards for transparency on chain for token projects are low.
They
And
are
it's just,
absolutely
yeah. And it's just the norm. So people just are like, well, everyone else is freaking doing it. So this is just
that's
what
it.
I'm going to do.
And
Yeah.
retail's none the wiser. It's hard.
Yeah.
If I'm going to bet, like I'm going to bet, if I'm going to buy $50 worth of a token, I'm not reading the white paper. I'm not going to dig into the
Yeah.
the founders' wallets. But in order to get the trust, I think, of bigger players that come in to the space, maybe someone is successful stock trader, successful sports gambler, and now they're going to move some of those profits into crypto to take some risks. You need things that supply this information that they're used to getting, that gives them the edge in those different areas of
Mm,
investing or speculating. I think if you guys
yeah.
can set the stage for that, just the fact that you're an RWA project, you're going to operate a lot in the real world as well with the different
Yep.
partnerships. And there's going to be licenses, there's going to be on-chain versus off-chain verification and all that stuff for RWAs, at least depending on what type. I think if you guys can lead the way, that'll be at least a silver lining for retail that comes out of this whole
I,
situation.
I agree with that. And I guess the one other thing I think is quite important here is like with a token project, when you launch it, right? This is, I mean, at least the way that I see it, which is why, like, even though this is a horrendous experience to go through for our community, our team, our supporters, our investors, like even for myself personally, um, my name, my reputation, and my word and commitment is like all over this thing, right?
Mhm.
Which is why Mantra and Ohm has been around for 5 years. We were down 97% before, whatever the hell it was, a lot, basically dead, right? And I could have gone when no one was paying attention and just started something else. Right? But
Absolutely.
that's just not what I'm about, and that's not what I stand for. And we're down, and it's tough, and it sucks, and whatever. But I'm one fortunate that our investors are standing behind us and have gone out of the way to be supportive and helpful during this tough time. I'm grateful and supportive to the community who stood by us and the people who've asked us tough questions and who when they ask us tough questions and they get transparent answers and communication, they start turning into these longer term supporters. So you build up this new community of people who are now aware, and obviously for the existing ones who stood by us, and then of course the team for working incredibly hard through this tough time and standing by when there's still a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty. I think it's just really inspiring for me to just keep going. And this is like I said, this is my legacy, this is my life, and I'll do everything I can to make Mantra and Om great again. Basically, that's not a political commentary, by the way, but
All right. Um, it just flows. It just
it
rolls
just
off the
flowed.
tongue.
Yeah, it
It's
just flows.
I say it at work all the time. So, um, all right. Two more questions about just the future of
Mm.
Mantra in the realm of RWAs. You've mentioned you have partnerships. You've mentioned you have investors. How hard did this shake the confidence in those parties? And do you think Mantra will be not only able to maintain most or all of the current partnerships, but continue to kind of push the envelope in that direction of getting value add partners for
I'm
RWA?
still very confident.
RWA is a massive undertaking.
I'm
So
s- I'm still very confident. I mean, I think it will be an added challenge for new partners who are interested in participating. But obviously, like there's a lot of misinformation out there right now, and we
mhm.
got to continue to show and show and show up and communicate effectively and be transparent and stick to our word and do what we say we're going to do, because then honestly over time that you know traumatic and challenging event becomes your like, oh shit, these guys are for real moment, right? They went through hell and made it out.
Mhm.
And that's a way to win a strong partner that you want, right? If you have someone who bets on you after, you know, they see you go through shit, and there's a challenging time and there's some misinformation or uncertainty around you, and they still support you and stay with you, or they say, hey, we're going to go in anyway, even with all these whatever in the past, that's the partner you want. So I'm very confident that not only the existing partners and investors and people, because honestly, they've been talking to us and we've been talking to them. We've maintained communication. We've been forthcoming. We've been, doing everything we can to make sure that they feel comfortable and we can, instill that trust back. Not that it's been necessarily broken, but of course, when you have all these crazy things going and going around online, then people are going to ask questions, and that's their right. And we'll do what we can to keep keeping them informed and telling them what happened.
I've got one more question, and it pertains to retail. The original way that I wrote the question,
Mm,
I'll read it, but that's not the way I intended. I originally wrote, "Should retail buy the Ohm token if they're bullish on RWA tokenization?" That's not really what I want to ask. What I want to ask is, do you consider the retail token holders your investors, or do you consider it more your partners are your investors and retail is maybe just participants in the on-chain ecosystem, if that makes sense?
mm. No, retail is. If you have one ohm in your wallet, you're an ohm investor. You're a Mantra investor. I would for sure say that. Like we
Got
have
it.
institutional investors, and probably when I like, if you're just thinking about it from like a communication standpoint, generally when I say our investors, the ones that at least in this particular context, the investors that were accused of being part of the selling,
Mhm.
um, right? Like I'm not talking about the guy who has one ohm in his wallet. I'm talking about the guys who hold big portions of tokens, who are brand name institutional players. Like that's who I'm talking about in that instance. But that being said, if you're one ohm holder, if you have half of an ohm, right? You're a Sherpa, you're an Omi to me. Um, and I take that very seriously, man. Like I don't care when people reach out to me on Twitter or Telegram or whatever. Like obviously I can't get to every single person because particularly in the last week, it's just been insane. But like you know, I don't give a shit if you have. I don't know if you have one ohm, 100 ohm, 1,000 ohm, a million ohm in your wallet. It doesn't matter to me, right? So if you're part of our community, then you deserve time, attention, and support in this time. Period.
If people are going to follow developments, is your Twitter account the best one to stay on top of? Are you guys releasing
Yes.
official? Oh, so it's your Twitter. All right, I'll
It's
make sure that's
most of it's coming from mine. Like sometimes we use the mantra official account just to like maybe have the
Mhm.
first post, but generally the additional commentary, all the thoughts, it's all going to be from mine. So
All right, I'll make sure that
use and follow mine.
that's up on the screen for people that watch this much. But appreciate you committing to transparency, trying to make the best of this bad situation, especially for token holders.
Yeah,
Um, and thanks so much for returning my communication. I know you've been busy, and this was really nice to squeeze this in. It's my first interview in like 6 months because it's so hard to
nice.
schedule. You made it easy. Listen, I'm here for RWAs. I wish Mantra the best of luck, and I think if you do turn this around, it's going to be maybe, like you said, the greatest crypto comeback of all time. So good luck with that, man.
Appreciate that, man. Thanks for the time.